Hello, everybody. Welcome to 12 Days of the Comic Source Presents Bad Idea. We're here to talk about the final book that was amongst the first five released, kind of the first wave of Bad Idea. It's The Lot. This is definitely a horror title, if you will, not for the faint of heart. It's written by Marguerite Bennett. The art is absolutely amazing. Rocky and I were just talking about it before we started recording. The debate or the conversation, I guess you'd say, on if it works in black and white, would it work better in color? I know there was some discussion amongst Bad Idea themselves on if they wanted to do it in color, if they wanted to do it in black and white. The artist is Renato Guedes. And he's actually relatively fast. He digitally paints things, and he had done some stuff for Valiant toward the end of their run. Obviously, a lot of the Bad Idea brass had come from Valiant. Ultimately, they went with a black and white ink wash, and it really works. It helps to set the mood and the tone, especially when we get in the story. We'll talk about how it's kind of a little bit old Hollywood or what have you. But there's also a part of me that thinks, man, some of these scenes you could have really had some powerful impact with the color. But the danger you have with doing it colored is and this happens so often with horror books, right? Because it tends to be darker palettes, a lot of blacks and browns and grays, dark blues, dark greens, what have you. The art can be kind of muddy, and then you lose any impact at all from the art. So I think ultimately they probably made the right choice going with black and white. But if you're familiar with Marguerite Bennett's work, she's done other horror type titles before. One of her most successful creator-owned series, Animosity, over at that publisher that shall not be named, was a little bit of a take on post-apocalyptic, a little bit of horror themes or what have you. But this draws a lot of things. The story draws on a lot of things that Marguerite's probably uniquely suited to talk about. We talk about trying to break into Hollywood as a writer. We're talking about being a woman amongst that world. Very much a man's world. I mean, we all know with the Me Too movement and what have you. A little bit of backlash and a little bit of justice served for women in that world who'd been mistreated for decades upon decades, and this story touches on a lot of that as well. So I think Rocky, I think you actually enjoyed it more than myself. I don't always enjoy horror. I wouldn't say it's my favorite genre. This is a very good story though, but give us your thoughts. And I know you said you really enjoyed it. So what
I did.
made it so, why did it work so well for you?
Well, straight up because of the story. Often I find with horror stories, I often find that a lot of horror stories sometimes focus. They try to focus just on the horror itself, the blood and the gore and what have you, and the central conceit is just find new ways to do something horrific. What I really enjoyed about this was just that it was genuinely a character based story, and the horrors emanate from the characters themselves and what the characters themselves basically wish for, and that's what I find. And that's it's true horror. I mean, there's that old expression, we're all the author of our own misfortune, and there's nothing more terrible than fates that we call forth our own fates in our own way. And in this case, when you think of Hollywood, you think of Margaret Bennett, the writer here, uses old Hollywood intermixed with new Hollywood, and it's told through a character named Aviva Copeland, who ends up working for Cloverleaf Studios, and they have this old abandoned lot, and it's Aviva's job to essentially help the studio make money again and sort of revitalize the studio a little bit. So she goes and reviews the books, and she discovers that there's this abandoned lot that she wants to try to make the most out of, and she doesn't understand why this lot's closed down, because she figures, well, it could be used. We could use this. I mean, it's why has this thing been abandoned when it's a potential source for revenue and what have you. And essentially, it's through the investigation of this lot and looking at its history that it's got a pretty there's a lot of deaths surrounding this lot. And ultimately, what's discovered is that the central element is this: there's this demon god demon god called the Binder, that back in the day, this director by the name of Oliver Larson wanted to make a movie, and he wanted to make the ultimate horror movie. And so he went and he tried to find actual real life demons or cults. And he ended up making a deal with this demon god called a binder, and he on this Hollywood lot, and and this is back in the 40s or 50s, and it consists around 5 characters made a deal with this demon god named Ethan. There's a Ethan who's a writer. Lillian was a producer. Gordon was a producer. The guy named Bruce was an actor, and then there was Oliver himself. And basically, the deal made is that they can get whatever they wish for. Their wish can be granted, but they have to pay a price. They have to pay a price in love or in blood. And ultimately, what happens is that everyone on the lot had to do that, had to make a deal with the demon god, and ultimately everyone on the lot ended up paying the ultimate price, except for these 5 people: Ethan, Lillian, Gordon, Bruce, and Oliver managed to survive. And the reason why they managed to survive over decades in Hollywood, they closed down the lot, is that this binder god, demon god, couldn't get to them in order to make them pay their price in love or in blood, because they managed to very cleverly make it so that the price paid, if the price you paid in order to be rich and famous, if the price you paid to be the best actor or the best writer, if the price you paid you have to give up something you love. Well, they would do that. And that's where the horror comes in with these individual characters. Like, what they gave up, they intentionally sacrificed the one director sacrificed his own daughter. The one producer sacrificed his own son, all for the power and the love. And there's a horror element to that. And what I particularly like is how it comes through in the end. And this is through 4 issues. I love how through it all you imagine this demon god, this binder, being this, or binder, being this horrible creature, and yet this creature is actually just fulfilling the contract. That was the deal that was made. You made the deal, and they're just fulfilling it. And this Aviva Copeland is really the true hero of this story. She actually sets out initially because she wants to help these acts. She wants to help Ethan, Lillian, Gordon, Bruce, and Oliver. She wants to help them, but they're all corrupted. They've all become sort of corrupted by the deal that they made. And ultimately, at the end, it's Aviva herself that ends up making a sacrifice and a deal of her own making with the demon god that ultimately leads to a very dark ending, but one that is very appropriate for the story. And it's almost like I don't even want to ruin it. It's that I didn't see the ending coming. It caught me off guard. I thought it was quite good, and great way to build suspense. It felt like a three act movie. It really did. And I particularly loved the third act, which was in the final issue. I thought was very well. So character work was just fantastic. The art is the art is excellent. The black and white didn't bother me at all. The covers are fantastic. I don't own physical copies. I just seen, the covers. Each individual cover has one of the characters. The first cover one has Aviva Copeland on the cover, and I believe the other 3 covers have either. I think one of them has some of the other characters that I mentioned on the other covers themselves. But in any event, just a beautiful. It looks beautiful. The covers. I want to own this physical one day. Maybe I'll have to try to pick them up at a Comic-Con if I can find them. But I really thought that this, as a horror story, this had a really great story, great character work. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever read anything by Marguerite Bennett better than this, to be honest. This is her best writing that I've ever read of her so far, to be quite honest. And I've read some of her Animosity, but I think I enjoy this more than that. So I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the best thing that she's written. The thing that I enjoy the most. I mean, her Insect series over at Aftershock was good. Some of her DC work was very, very good. I don't know what she's doing right now. To be honest, she hasn't written anything that I know of in a long time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The story's it's so visceral. And you're right. The covers are amazing as well. Also by Renato Guedes. You mentioned Aviva on the first cover. Second cover has Oliver, the director. Third cover has Lillian, the executive. There was a producer on the movie that eventually gives Aviva the job. So Lillian's an executive for the parent company, as it were, that Cloverleaf Studios is owned by, and so she kind of gives Aviva the shot. And then the last cover is Aviva's friend Jaya, who's an actress whose parents are very famous Bollywood actors. So yeah, there's a lot to like about the series. The deal that these people made with the binder, with the demons, the cult, and the idea of it being a contract, and the contract details being binding, like all of that is really intriguing, and it makes it work. But for me, when the series really came together, it was in the second, is it the second issue? Maybe it's the third issue. The third issue, when after Aviva and her friends discover, they talk to the director Oliver. They find out what happened at the lot. They find out about all the innocent people that were killed, and kind of the depravity and greed and sort of self-interested take that so many of the people that survived, they survived because they were selfish, because they were willing to sacrifice loved ones or whatever. When that's discovered by these five, and they decide that they're going to try to stop it, because the fear that Aviva has is that once the binder is able to, for lack of a better term, exact revenge on or fulfill the contracts and take the lives of these five, that then it'll be free to be unleashed upon the world. And they're worried about other innocents suffering. They're not that concerned about the five. Aviva is willing to save them, but not at the expense of any more innocent lives. And so when she goes back to the lot after all this has been discovered, and she confronts the binder, and she wants to know, where do you come from? Who is your boss? Like, who's funding this? Like, why are you doing this? We understand that it was some sort of a cult that, summoned you or whatever, but there's got to be somebody, behind it. Like, who do you work for? Who do you worship? Who's calling the shots? Who's the boss, basically? And the binder says, he talks about dreams, he talks about sacrifice, and he talks about story, right? Everything that I am comes from the places where stories are told, from where things that seem impossible become reality. And it's so meta, right? Because you're reading a story. This isn't actually true. This is fiction, but it's a fiction that is talking about the way other things work, right? Like the stories that were told. I mean, Oliver, the director, his wish may be the most profound. I want to be the best storyteller. I want to be the best filmmaker that ever was, and he talks about how he can justify the sacrifice of his daughter when Aviva goes and asks him. And he's like, well, because I gave up one innocent life, my daughter was sickly, and yeah, I cared about her, but she had leukemia. It wasn't any kind of life. She was going to suffer, what have you. But I made all these movies that people will remember forever. And I've affected millions of lives. And, that's how he's justifying it. And this is the story that's being told. This is a story that Marguerite is talking about. And Oliver is sort of that voice that gives it, that gives story weight, right? Like, he's our character that's saying how important stories are. And I say it all the time, right? How you can really judge what a particular society or group of people judges as important by looking at the make-believe, looking at the fictions they create. If something, a particular event or a particular idea or whatever it is important enough for them to make up a story to pass along that knowledge, or to honor that knowledge, or examine that idea or that theme or that theory or whatever it is, then that that's something that's important to that society, because they've taken the time to create something that is, that examines that idea. They've taken the time to create a story, around it. So when you talk about this binder and him saying, my power comes from the idea of story, from the idea of what we're willing to sacrifice from story and create and imagine. And he's like, these are just places where stories are told, but in the end, it's people that that wanted to create something that was more important to them than their actual reality, right? And in that way, stories meant more to them than life itself. Stories meant more than actual reality, more than what was actually happening. It meant more than people. Certainly that's the case for Oliver, right? When he talks about his daughter, it's the idea of story and the stories that he's going to create are more important to him than his daughter's life. So for me, that's when the story really clicked into place. And you're right about the ending. When you get to the end of the third issue, I sort of felt like, well, that could have been the end of the story, right? But it turns out there's more to the story. There's a fourth chapter that's almost like an epilogue in a lot of ways that really, um, in a sense, gave it a feeling of justice, if you know what I'm saying. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much without that final issue where some of the characters, for lack of a better term, get a comeuppance. They get what's coming to them,
Yeah.
a sense of justice, if you will. So I didn't mind that at all. I thought that was
Yeah, and
the end.
I thought it was interesting how all the people that made those contracts and those deals, they were so concerned about their story and they could write their own story, but with a sacrifice. So they sacrificed people that they loved so that they could write their own story of their lives. And yet Aviva at the end chooses to rewrite their ending. She's the
Yeah.
ending. She gives them the consequence. And so that's just, isn't that interesting how some of the best stories have surprise endings? Well, Aviva is the surprise ending to the people that got to that forced their own story at the sacrifice of others, and so and they got their comeuppance in the form of a very bad ending for themselves, thanks to Aviva. So I thought there was even some poetry in the way it ended in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, and it just goes to show that everybody, or there's that whole idea in debate, like the last word is the most powerful, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Aviva ends up with the last word. She ends up with the last word. So yeah, you can be as important as you want when you're writing your story, but whoever writes the last story really is the one that gets to have the most influence, because everything else after that came before can be rewritten. So yeah, this is an amazing story. If you're a fan of horror, definitely recommend it. The Renato Guedes art, like I said, is absolutely amazing. In terms of the backups, the B sides, I just want to mention them real quick. The first one in issue 1 is called Reverse Art Thief. Matt Kent is the writer. Doug Braithwaite, incredible art. Basically tells this story very quickly of a guy who goes around and he steals art from people who they themselves have stolen it, right? Like in the story that we get in here, um, there's a very rich person that has some art that was stolen by the Nazis that should be returned to its rightful owner. That's what the guy does. In the second one, we get this. It's a weird one. Peter Milligan is the writer, so it makes sense that it would be weird. Sarah Barini is the artist. It's called Monster in My Life. Oh, sorry, that's actually an issue number 3. But anyway, it tells a story about a son and daughter who are very close because their parents are alcoholics and abusive, and the son turns into an insect. We don't know why, but it just does. But he just does. Yeah, it's weird. The second one might be my favorite. It fits into the whole hero trade story. It's called Sink Jet. So Matt Kent and David Lapham, who do a lot of the hero trade, and it's this group. I guess you could kind of compare them to like the Fantastic Four. Well, their mechanic who works on all their equipment, he's kind of an alcoholic, and they don't want to put up with it anymore. He gets drunk and goes like on a 3-day blackout drinking binge. And when he comes to, they basically fire him. And so he's kind of disgruntled. And so he decides he's going to try to find a way to make some money. So he goes to their, quote unquote junkyard, and he steals this quantum radio that lets him hear a radio broadcast from a year in the future. So he's able to like play the stock market and stuff like that. That one's really interesting, and it feels like there could be a lot more to that story. And then in issue 4, the final backup that we have, or final B side, and I mentioned it when we talked in the other episode today. It's that Mission Go Tankers story. They gave out a colorized version of this as an exclusive at New York Comic Con this year. Bad Idea did. But this is the black and white version that came out first, and it's a prequel to the Tankers series that we talked about on a previous episode of 12 Days of the Comic Source Presents Bad Idea. So definitely enjoyed that as well. And I mentioned the other episode, I'll mention it here. Robin Venditti Would love to do more tankers. We may see more tankers at some point. I sure hope that we do. And I also hope that you all listen to our other episode that came out today about Hank Howard, Pizza Detective, which is probably my favorite thing, favorite Matt or Robert Venditti story, because it's just so amazing how seriously the guy takes himself. It's hilarious. And I hopefully we get more of that as well. So I don't know if you read any of the backups, Rocky, but anything to add as we're winding down here?
Well, I enjoyed Tankers, the Tankers backup. Tankers is probably one of my favorite that we've talked about so far. The lot here is probably, I'd have to give maybe the lot that we just reviewed here probably number one, because it's just I really like it. Tankers is probably second for me, but I just love the concept in Tankers, and that it's a prequel, and you know, a prequel with more blood, guts, and gore, dinosaurs and humans being human being being eaten by dinosaurs. Hey, why not? What's not to like? Fun stuff.
Yeah, 100%. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget, link in the show notes to go and check out the Save Now Kickstarter that's going on right now for Bad Idea. We talked about that. We talked about Save Now. The first time we saw it was in the Hank Howard Pizza Detective one shot that was only $1. So if you want to learn more about that, again, be sure you listen to the other episode that comes out today. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube on the Comic Source channel, we appreciate the support. Go ahead and subscribe. But also head over to Rocky's channel on YouTube, Comic Space Boom! It's where we are every Tuesday to do the DC Spotlight, talk about all the DC books for the week. Well, most of them, almost all of them. Talk about them every week. You can leave comments. Be sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of the content. And also, if you want to be sure not to miss any of the other audio-only content that comes out from the Comic Source, because most of the Comic Source episodes are audio-only, just go to wherever platform you enjoy managing your podcast on. Do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. So we want to wish everybody happy Christmas, happy holidays. Really hope it's a fun time for you and your family. We appreciate you joining us as always. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you later.